Okay, we are on with Kevin Rooke. Oh my, I don't want to mess it up. I feel like I asked you this last time. Kevin Rooke.
Yeah, you got it.
Rooke. Kevin Rooke. And Kevin has been on before. I was just thanking him before recording here that we're really grateful that you're on because, well, why don't you share with everybody? What are you doing right now? Because you're having some great discussions. What are you up to? Can you describe what you do? How do you describe what you do to your friends and stuff?
Sure. So I think most people are familiar with the podcast. Anyone who knows my name would know me through the podcast. And that is something that I've been focusing on for the last year or two, speaking with builders in the Lightning Network ecosystem. About a year and a half ago, or I guess maybe now 2 years ago, I realized there was something happening in Lightning and no one was tuning in, no one was paying attention. And so I figured, why not, start studying it. I did a little angel investing, have started this podcast, and this all is in pursuit of helping people understand what's happening with the Lightning Network, because I think it's a really important innovation that often gets overlooked because it doesn't come attached with some crazy, tokenomics scheme that is going to make everyone rich tomorrow. It's a kind of subtle way of introducing this cool payment system. And it takes a lot of, it's a slow process to get the Lightning Network built in a decentralized way, and then to get people to use it, because again, there's no immediate, sugar rush of insane yields or some mechanism that's going to pull people immediately to jump right in and get FOMO like they would in some other asset class that skyrockets, right? It's all built on Bitcoin. And so the thing that I saw that was interesting was just that now we can take this Bitcoin tool that we have and we can use it in so many new interesting ways. We can send it for basically nothing, very low fees that scale down to zero. And we can send those transactions in new ways across the internet. And so in a way, I think this was Jack Dorsey's term, was that the internet needs a native currency, and Bitcoin is now becoming that native currency, piggybacking on the Lightning Network, using that as the rails through which the Bitcoin is transferred.
So you've described it already a little bit there, but for someone listening who's familiar with Bitcoin, how would you describe the Lightning Network? Would it be that it is this kind of payment network? How do you describe it to people?
Yeah, I think that's the best way to think about it. If you're new to Bitcoin or new to Lightning, think of it as a peer-to-peer payments network. So I can send money directly to you or to you through another participant in this network. And there's thousands of channels that are connecting different participants on the network today. But really what's happening is payments are hopping from one participant to another, to another, to another, and they're eventually reaching their end destination. And the participants in the middle are the ones routing the payment. They are the ones, they typically charge a small fee to pass along a payment, take in a payment from one person, send it out to another. And you have enough of those connections. They're all happening kind of at light speed. And so what happens is at the end of these connections, this payment from person A who doesn't know person B can happen through this connection network. And so, yeah, there's plenty of money now on this network. I think the latest I saw was about 5,500 Bitcoin of liquidity kind of parked in channels on this network, waiting to be sent back and forth between participants.
It's almost, when you see a diagram of it, it's almost like a neural network, or like a spider web or a neural network, like this interconnected thing where payments are kind of hopping around. And then just for anyone listening, would it be fair? Is this fair or not fair? Is it fair to say that these people running these Lightning nodes that are facilitating this are all basically just individuals around the world, and that this is a decentralized thing? Or is that not fair to describe it that way? Is it more centralized?
Yeah.
Okay. So now there's big players.
Yeah. And at first there was this hobbyist movement, and it still exists today. And there's still quite a strong community when there's communities called PlebNet, lots of node operators sharing ideas and strategies and tools with each other about how to operate their Lightning nodes. They're connecting with each other to pass liquidity around the network. But then you're seeing now bigger players. You have a lot of enterprise players in the Lightning space, Voltage and River and Block just created a Lightning node with C equals. And you're now starting to see the development of enterprise Lightning services. And so these are kind of managing tools that can manage and abstract away the complexity of Lightning, because not every business is going to want to deal with that, right? Not every business is going to want to, know the mechanics of routing payments through this, network of liquidity and trying to figure out, what's the fastest path to reach a certain node, or how can I maintain my liquidity when demand is high? All these questions are now being solved by enterprises stepping in. And so they're starting to operate some pretty big nodes. And then the third kind of participant, so the enterprises that I just described are offering liquidity services. So they're kind of like abstracting away the complexity, helping you out. But then there's another class of participants that are exchanges. And those exchanges are typically offering Lightning funding and withdrawals for their customers. There is some overlap. Some also offer Lightning services, but the exchange category, last I checked, was about 46% of the Bitcoin on the Lightning Network in public capacity terms is held by these exchanges. So there's about, a dozen or two.
And why would people want an exchange to offer Lightning functionality? What is in it for like the end user in that capacity? Like, what's the importance of that?
Well, so one thing that I think is useful for people who use exchanges is these people are typically traders, right? And so if you're a trader and you don't have funds on a particular exchange, but you notice an arbitrage opportunity there, and maybe you see two prices on different exchanges that are not the same, and you're like, I know I can make a spread trade here. I know I can make money on this. But if you have to now fund your account using the Bitcoin blockchain, it's 10 minutes for your first confirmation. Maybe you can't even use your funds for 3 confirmations. And so you have this, now you've lost this arbitrage opportunity. Lightning lets you fund instantly. You can move money quicker. You can take funds off an exchange. If there's a panic, if there's some reason you need your funds immediately, you have them. You don't have to go through long withdrawal periods. But then also another element is now people are really earning Bitcoin on the Lightning Network. And now this is just a cool new tool for them a new path that they can take to bring all the Bitcoin they've earned through all sorts of apps that we can get into today onto an exchange. And then if they need to sell some, they can sell some. If they need to, send it on chain after that, the exchange can act as that facilitator. So for example, I can take funds from Lightning, I can move them onto an exchange. The exchange can then send them out on chain on Bitcoin. And so then I can deposit them into a, cold storage wallet.
Jeez, this stuff's happening fast.
It is.
Basically what we're doing is recreating all the stuff that any economy would want to happen. But instead of using the whole legacy systems to do it, we're now doing it all digitally native. And you can see Bitcoin, to me, is becoming that foundational layer of all the things that people want to do. And I think some people might think it's happening really slowly, and other people who aren't paying attention to this will look back every 12 months. And if they pay a bit of attention once a year, they're going to be like, holy shit, this is happening super fast. Like you kind of have two parties where like one group is like, this is taking too long, nothing's happening. And another group is like, what the hell? Because just hearing you say that is, to me, pretty crazy, because now we can send money around the world really quickly. You can send it to exchanges. You could send it to your friend. The best demonstration that I've done with people, I just did this with some friends. I was down in Florida and they had never used Lightning before. So I'll be curious what you think of this little example, but I got them to download Wallet of Satoshi, which is a Lightning app. And I had some Bitcoin in Wallet of Satoshi already. And I think I took 25 cents worth or, 50 cents worth. I don't know what it was, like 1,000 sats, something like that, to 2,500 sats, whatever it was. And I said, okay, I'm going to send it from my wallet to your wallet. We both had our phones up. And, they had their Wallet of Satoshi. I got their receiving address. So for anyone listening, that's just the address where you're sending the Bitcoin to. And I, got my Wallet of Satoshi. And I'm like, all right, send this guy 2,500 sats. And I pressed send or confirm or whatever it said on the button. And it literally shocked him because he saw it pop up on his phone instantly. And, that was like the breathtaking moment for him. Like it was like a physical reaction to what just happened. He was like, whoa, and the beauty of that is that's final settlement to him. Like there's no other waiting for him to get the money from me. It's done. That transaction's over. So if he needed to go and do something else, he could instantly send that money on to someone else. And that to me was like I've done that demo a few times to people, and I just love their reaction. Is that the kind of demo you do with friends, or what do you do to show the Lightning Network to someone?
So that's a cool one. I think one way you can take it to the next level is if you have multiple people, if you have like 4 or 5 people, you can have them all
daisy chained
and different apps. Like that's where the interoperability comes into play, where, all of a sudden, if you're doing everything between Wallet of Satoshi, it's cool. But then, I could say I can do all that through ShakePay in Canada, right? ShakePay.
Yeah, got it. Yeah.
Send back and forth. But if you're now doing it Wallet of Satoshi to Moon, to Breeze, to, across different Lightning apps and Cash App, and you start to say like how interoperability is an important piece of this puzzle. Mm-hmm. And so that could, light up another light bulb in people's heads.
Okay. So now I have go ahead. No, sorry. Go ahead.
I think that earning is also a very interesting way to onboard someone. Once people, and Noster's a cool way to do it now.
Okay, so let me get you hold on. I'm going to definitely ask you about this. Let me ask you something first though. What are your favorite like Lightning, just simple, basic Lightning wallets right now? Do you have like a favorite one? Is it Wallet of Satoshi, a different one? And can you just describe it a little bit for someone who's never heard of like, what is a Lightning wallet? So do you have a favorite one, or a top 2 or 3 or whatever? And what is it exactly?
I use a bunch of them. I test them out mostly, and I often use the wallet itself as a tool to move funds from the various apps and services that I use, and kind of like consolidate them or send them out, or maybe pay for things on Lightning Network. But there's a spectrum of wallets that serve a lot of different needs. For beginners, Wallet of Satoshi is a great starting point. It gives you the idea of the Lightning Network. You get to understand the mechanics of sending and receiving. It is custodial though, so they do have control of those funds while you're using that wallet. You can branch out into non-custodial options. There's Zeus, there's Breeze, there's more than a dozen by now.
And what does non-custodial mean, just to describe for everyone listening?
So it'd be self-custodial, meaning like you are in control of your own funds. So, and that's kind of the ideals that Bitcoiners try and spread in the world, is that there's a big difference between, someone holding money for you and saying that you have this money, and you actually holding that money yourself. And so that's what the self-custodial wallets allow.
Did you see, I don't know if you saw today, Paul, did you see Paul Krugman on Twitter today?
Yeah, I saw it.
Yeah, he was complaining about Venmo or whatever he uses to move money around. And I guess they locked him out of his account, or he couldn't get access to his account, and he was complaining. And everyone who's into Bitcoin just annihilating this poor guy on Twitter, saying, hey, like, there's a solution that you dismiss to this. It's called Bitcoin. You should check it out. And anyway, sorry to divert from our discussion there. But okay, so like a self-custodial would be where you are running some piece of software that's acting as or it's giving you the ability to custody the Bitcoin yourself. Yeah.
And some people might be familiar with the idea of like writing down 12 words or 24 words, a secret kind of passphrase. That typically, there's some level of that comes with self-custody. Some way you are taking control of your own keys. And so you are now responsible for your own funds. Of course, that has for some people, it's a drawback of now you have to watch out what you're doing with your money. There's no one there to save you if you do something wrong. But there's a spectrum, right? I think a lot of Bitcoiners align with the self-custodial view that we should all be taking control of our money. But to a lot of beginners, it's a view that is hard to grasp and hard to understand. And I think a lot of beginners struggle with the idea of, why would I even want to take control of my money, especially if you live in a country like Canada, where we have it pretty good, all things considered. There's a lot of countries.
I think the whole trucker convoy thing woke a lot of Canadians up to that, though, because some people who I would say were maybe not even sympathetic to that movement did comment to me that like, oh, geez, maybe I should get some of this Bitcoin stuff, because they had this idea that they could custody it themselves. So I think even in Canada, there's been a little bit of a change in kind of consciousness around that concept.
Yeah.
But you're right. It's kind of like when you first look into gold, and then you think, oh, I'm going to take possession of gold directly myself. And people were like, well, why would you do that? So like if you've already gone down the gold path, then it might be more obvious to you why you would want to custody Bitcoin. At least that's where I was coming from. Like I understood the value of like custodying gold myself. So then the Bitcoin concept was a little bit more approachable when I finally understood it, after dismissing it for many years first, which I did. Like, geez, I'm too smart for that Bitcoin thing. Be gone, Okay. So, and then another question then for you, if somebody has some Bitcoin and they send it to a Lightning wallet, can they get it back to their Bitcoin wallet pretty simply right now? Or is that a complicated thing that they can't really do?
So this is another thing that depends on the wallet you're using. If you're using a wallet or if you're using an exchange or a service, like it varies. Some are Lightning only wallets and you actually can't send you have to be able to, you have to be sending funds on the Lightning Network to receive them there. Others will allow you to swap on chain natively, like within the app. They'll figure out a way on the back end to allow your Lightning funds to come in and then your on-chain funds to go out. And so, there's like Wallet of Satoshi, for example, does allow Bitcoin and Lightning. That's the kind of like beginner friendly version of like, they will let you send funds in Bitcoin, out Lightning, swap them as you wish, and they'll just figure it out on the back end. They do charge a little fee for that, but that's kind of a service that is developing around, Bitcoin and Lightning that I think will be more popular over time.
Yeah, got it. And I think that's a big deal. The first time I monkeyed around with Lightning, I sent a bit of Bitcoin to my Lightning wallet. I was playing around with a node that I didn't really know what I was doing. And I'm like, oh my God, I don't know how to get it out. Like now it's in there. I didn't know. I was thankful that I didn't send like a whole bunch to it, but I was kind of stuck. But it's come so far already. That would be, I guess, maybe 2 years ago or so. I can't remember, a year and a half ago. But it feels like it's come so far already where that's not really as much of an issue anymore.
Right.
Okay, so there's this thing, Lightning. It's this kind of financial transactional layer that's super fast that kind of settles Bitcoin pretty instantly. There's bigger players coming into the game. What else are you noticing? And there's wallets, of course, some like we talked about, Wallet of Satoshi, that is non-custodial, but then there's self-custodial options that you can use as well. One of your favorites being which one again? Sorry, what was one of your favorites? For
wallets in general or
for self-custodial?
Zeus is a good one for self-custodial. But there are over a dozen now wallets across the spectrum of self-custodial to third-party custodial.
Okay. And all of this is allowing money to be set around the world with kind of final settlement pretty much instantly at very low fees, trending down. Now, what else are you seeing? Now we can kind of get to you were going to bring up like, what other fun thing, the kind of floor is yours. You talk on you do a great job on your podcast, talking to so many other people. What is exciting you or what are you paying attention to right now?
Yeah, well, I think one of the interesting things that Lightning enables is because now you can send money in really small increments. I mean, before Lightning, like how would you have sent 10 cents to someone? You and I wouldn't do this. It's not something that is normal for us. We've never, bought something on the internet for 10 cents. We've never sent 10 cents directly to someone. It's like, I think even Interac e-transfers have a minimum of like $1 or $5. You have all sorts of payment methods that actually have minimums that, you never really bump into because it doesn't make sense to send that small amount. And so all the things you buy on the internet are, $10 or more. All the things you even buy in grocery stores. People don't want to serve you if you buy something for $2 on a credit card. They go, actually, if you're under $10, it's an extra 50 cents. Mm-hmm. And that's why, because it's so hard to process those tiny, tiny payments. And so what happens is because it's so hard to process tiny payments, you now have an entire economy of tiny, tiny payments that can be online, offline, all over the place that cannot be that no one can express their desire to make those payments. So this entire economy, the one analogy that I thought was really good from Strike's founder, Jack Mallers, I believe he did a speech about how when stock trading went from like $10 per stock, $10 fee every time you trade, to Robinhood offering $0 trading, it enabled all this, a mania of stock trading. Everyone wanted to become a day trader, right? And we saw that over the last couple of years. And you can argue whether that's for good or for bad, but it did open the floodgates. There was an entire economy that we didn't even know existed, right? We thought, only, professional investors or, older, wealthier people like to do stock trading. And now we realize, wait, 18-year-olds that are getting their first paycheck, they can also do stock trading too. And so I think we're going to see something similar on Lightning, where now that we've opened up the floodgates, all these transactions that could have been happening between like a dollar, 10 cents, 1 cent, 1/10 of a cent, 1/100th of a cent, 1,000th of a cent, like all these little tiny transactions.
Yeah, I never thought about it that way.
Yeah. And so that's what I'm really excited about. Like what are we going to unleash in that vertical? All those little transactions. And so we're seeing early signs of it right now. I think one of the cool apps that is in the Lightning ecosystem is pretty popular. It's called Stacker News. It's like Reddit, but instead of earning upvotes or, Reddit's proprietary token of that's not worth anything to anyone, you earn sats. And so, if I post an article there and someone likes it, instead of hitting upvote, they hit a little lightning bolt and it sends me sats. And so I get 10 sats and I go, well, 10 sats, it's only, it's less than a penny. I think a penny's like 40 sats today or something, 25 or 40 sats. I can't remember. But if now 100 people send 10 sats, now I have 1,000 sats. What happens if 100 million people do that? Like you see people getting likes on Instagram or Facebook, whatever, in the millions, even on Twitter. When Elon tweets, he gets millions of likes sometimes. What happens if it's millions times, 10 sats? Then all of a sudden you're at 10 million sats.
Jeez,
10 million sats is 1/10 of a Bitcoin. And that's thousands of dollars. And it's kind of, you can collect it from a large group of people. And so to each participant there, it's a really insignificant amount of money, less than a penny. But when you combine it across the internet, you start to go, whoa, we can now bundle tiny, tiny fractions of payments, direct them to the people who are creating great content. And now all of a sudden, to the end person who created the content, they actually receive a meaningful sum of money. So that's what I'm excited about.
That's pretty good. Like, you're just making me realize that if somebody was to put out a good piece of content, somebody is a good baker and they come up with an amazing chocolate chip recipe and they just posted it to Stacker News. I don't know if that would be posted to Stacker News or not, but if they posted it there and everybody was, or not everybody, but globally, there was 100,000 people who just said, "Oh, that's like the best chocolate chip cookie ever made. I'm going to send you 5 cents worth of Bitcoin." So however many sats that would be. You're right. People who just create good stuff and bring value to the global community can now be rewarded quite handsomely in just these tiny increments that would be rounded to zero before, but now the economic ability is there for that to be transacted between each other. That is kind of game changing, especially if you extrapolate 5 years forward from today, because a lot of the media that we use is not really designed to allow those types of transactions. But now I'm sure we're going to talk about Nostr in a second, but now you can start to, and Stacker News is doing it. You can start to see the evolution of this. I never really thought about that, like how there's so much value in the economic activity of transactions, maybe below $1. That we've just never really dealt with. I really like how you described that, Kevin.
And like for the longest time, they've been like hidden. We've been wanting, a tool to actually, like, if you had asked anyone a decade ago whether they'd like to be paid for their Facebook likes or their Instagram likes or their Twitter likes, they'd say, yeah, I'd love to. But no one's ever, that's not a normal behavior that people are accustomed to. We joined the internet and we joined social media a decade ago, and everyone was getting likes, getting, follows, subscribes, whatever. And none of them were making money directly on that, activity. Sure, you can monetize elsewhere and you can earn for ads and things like that, but no one was actually making money for the specific activity of, I liked what you just said and I want you to have value. And so now we've opened the floodgates there. Now anyone who likes what you post on the internet can pay you. And it doesn't have to just be like the tiny payments are really interesting because it's new. But what we're finding right now is so this kind of like system of making payments after the fact when you enjoy something. This is kind of like value for value is the term that people are using for this. And it kind of had its beginnings in podcasting, but it's now spreading to other forms of content on the internet. It doesn't mean everyone has to pay some tiny amount. People can pay really large amounts too. Like if someone really enjoyed a movie that you produced, or, you created this incredible chart or this incredible Twitter thread, they can pay you, they don't have to pay you 10 cents. They can pay you $100. They can pay you $500, $5,000, right? Like it's totally up to them. And there's no requirement, there's no obligation to make a payment. So it's a very interesting system that's unfolding where creators now have the tools to monetize, and where this all ends up, I'm not quite sure. It's really,
it's weird. It destroys boundaries in both corporations and nation states, because before, to do a lot of sizable transactions, if you created a movie and somebody really did want to give you, let's say $10,000, $100,000, $1 million, like if now we take the other extreme and go big, that's kind of difficult if you live in Brazil and the movie makers in Ireland, or you're in Canada and you wanted to do that to somebody in Australia. You'd have to kind of get a bank account down there, and is it, taxes or tax receipts and all this kind of stuff. Whereas now when there's a digitally native currency that can have final settlement the way you're describing, you're right. You can literally just send it cross borders. There's the barriers. It's like the friction is gone.
Yeah,
I know there could be tax implications. Yeah, like I know there could be still tax implications and all this. I'm not trying to say avoid taxes by any means. I do mean, though, it really does rip down the friction in a lot of ways.
Yep. Because then, like, let's think about, you and I could maybe send 10 cents to one another in the same country. It might not be economical. It might be not worth our time to do it on fiat rails. We'd probably spend more in transaction fees, the actual payment cost, but we could probably figure out a way at whatever the minimums are for e-transfers or credit cards. I bet you and I could send each other $1. But how would you do that? How would you do that overseas? There's no chance you're getting $1 payment there overseas in any reasonable time for any reasonable fee.
Jeez.
And so the whole economy is there's a whole new level. Overseas, it's not, the threshold in North America is, roughly $10 is what I find. That below that, merchants really don't want to accept credit cards, and they don't like having to deal with fiat payments. They'll deal with cash, but they don't want to deal with the Visa and MasterCard processing fees. But if you're talking about overseas payments, now all of a sudden that threshold is not $10. It's like $100 or $1,000. You really don't want to have to make a payment to someone in Asia or in South America on a regular basis. It's not an easy process, and the number of participants involved and the number of documents you have to connect all the dots on the wire transfer, make sure you got all the details right. Like, it's not a fun process to have to go through.
Well, just listening to you say this, it is occurring to me that technology is going to force this to happen, because when there's so much more technology, and people sharing information the way we are globally, you need a natively digital form of money to match that, because our current system is slowing down so much because of just what you're saying. Like, you're right. If I was going to send you less than $10, it's just the hassle. But and it's too slow. It's like you just want to move on and do other things. And on the flip side, I'm realizing that recently with our merchant accounts, we had some larger size charges go through, and we basically had to beg for our money. because the merchant account provider was like, well, what are these transactions? They don't match your normal transaction size. And we basically had to write essays, get on the phone multiple times with different levels of authority at the merchant account with their auditors or risk management department to basically tell them, yes, like these are valid transactions. And you almost feel like you're begging for your own money as a business. You already have a merchant account open. They've already approved you. You've done business for years, never had issues. And then if something doesn't match their criteria, you end up having to basically, what I feel is like beg for your own money. And you do it because you want your money, but it does feel a little bit demeaning. Mm-hmm. You know, I got to tell you. And then on the flip side, you're just making me also realize that I have a few friends who own some restaurants, and they were telling me about the margins in their restaurant. And I can't stop thinking about like, the margins, you know, if they're going to make on their business anywhere between 10 and 20% as a business, you know, maybe even lower if they're, you know, things aren't going quite right. If you can remove the merchant account fees that could be anywhere from like 1.8, 2% to 3.5%, depending on the card, that's a big difference to their bottom line. So there's all these implications. And sorry, one last thing, Kevin, now I'm talking too much here, but you're making me also realize programmatically, we haven't even discussed, because now you can programmatically have a monetary unit that maybe gets spit out to Kevin automatically every 5 minutes when maybe his podcast is listened to. Right. Exactly. Like it's just like automatically, oh, Tom listened to Kevin for 5 minutes, and I've just put in every 5 minutes I listen to this guy, spit out, 10 sats to him. Right.
Yeah.
And then never mind.
Happening every day. That's like on the podcast side. I'm seeing that I have now listeners who know that they can regularly send in lightning payments, and it happens every minute. So I see. So
where are you? Is that on Fountain? Can you describe that for people? So can you talk about that a little bit?
Yeah. So I use Fountain for podcasting, and that's the tool that I use to manage and kind of like interact with the guests the guests are one component, but also the listeners. So I can basically use Fountain. If I'm setting up a show, I can take the guest's Fountain username or their Lightning pub key if they have one from their node, and I can put those into the show splits so that anytime someone sends money to the show over the Lightning Network, that money gets split automatically between myself and the guest. And so every single show now, I ask the guest, can you send over your Fountain username or your pub key? I'll put you in the splits. And then all the listeners know that if they enjoy the show, I say it at the beginning of every episode, they can contribute, whatever value they got out of the show, they tell me, they decide. And that also is a signal for me as a podcaster. I can go, wow, a lot of people sent in sats on this episode. They really enjoyed it. Or not a lot of people sent in this one. It wasn't my best episode. Let's switch things up. Right. And so it's cool. You get a new signal, and then you get to interact with the audience, and they can contribute directly to you with like no one else in the way.
How's that working right now? Does the listener have to do it through the Fountain app? They have to be listening through Fountain?
No, they don't have to be listening through Fountain. They can use any Podcasting 2.0 app. So this is kind of like a new specification that some apps support. And then from there, they connect their Lightning wallet, or sometimes have your funds within for example, I believe on Breeze is a wallet that also has a Podcasting 2.0 integration.
Oh, does it?
Listen to podcasts and support them through the Breeze app. And so that will be visible to me using Fountain, but it's happening on a different app. And so you can see how the interoperability is also an important role here. And this is a common theme throughout Lightning. What we're trying to accomplish is like allowing anyone to make a payment to anyone else, and all being on the same interoperable payment standard. And so, I regularly check my Fountain feed, and I see, someone contributed from Breeze, someone contributed from Fountain, someone contributed anonymously. I don't know who they are, and I don't need to know who they are. And that's great for them because they may want the privacy. Maybe they just enjoy the show. They don't want to, hear their name shouted out at the end of the episode. They just want to contribute. That's cool too.
Huh. Jeez. I need to use, so this podcast that we record and share. So anyone listening to this, you can get to this podcast on the Fountain app. I don't use it as much myself because I drive this Tesla and Spotify's built in. And I'm just telling you, like, I listen to so many podcasts. I just launched the Spotify app and I'm listening to them all on there. But it does frustrate me a little bit because I know this all exists. And I'm like, damn, I'm listening to so much. And I am the type of person that if I saw value, I would send sats back to somebody right away. So I know that will evolve over the next few years and my own habits will change. So you can see it coming because there's a whole bunch of people out there like myself who are not doing the value to value thing aggressively yet, but we want to.
Right.
It's just, we're kind of like right there on the cusp. Like, I know it's there. I know it exists. Every once in a while I will log in and, do something, but it's not like a regular thing. But once that becomes a regular part of my everyday, geez, that changes a lot.
And there are still some frictions in the ecosystem. Like, I don't mean to paint the picture that everything's perfect today, because it's certainly not. We've come a very long way in the last year or two. I mean, I remember just trying out Lightning payments a couple of years ago. More often than not, I would expect the payment to fail. Like, I would just almost be a little surprised if the payment succeeded. And now we're at the point where like 90, 98, 99% of payments are going through. And this is coming from multiple sources on the Lightning Network, different node operators. They're all kind of saying, yeah, we're seeing 99% payment reliability, which is a great sign. But, there's challenges with, tax implications. All of a sudden you start sending a lot of money, you start converting it back to your currency. Which country do you live in? What are your tax implications? Did you earn the money? Is it a gift? Right? Like, that's something with with podcasting. It's like, is it income?
What is this?
I asked for it, but I didn't force anyone to pay. Is it a gift? Is it a donation? It's very hard. These waters are still muddy.
What else are you noticing that's catching your attention? I guess let me ask you specifically on Stacker News in the last 12 months. Are you noticing I see some of the stuff you share on Twitter. Are you noticing a change in usage on some of these platforms?
Yes, across the board, actually. On basically all platforms, I'm noticing what I saw about a year or two ago was a lot of the Lightning apps that I was talking with or, trying to learn more about, they were all at the stage of like hundreds of users. It was very, very early stages. Now, a lot of them, I've seen a ton of metrics in the Lightning space that suggest a lot of these apps, and some have confirmed this, that they're all in the kind of like tens of thousands of users range. So we've now seen this kind of jump from, it's 100x jump really in the last like year or two, where apps have now gone from like the earliest of early adopters to a bit more of a mainstream, but probably still early adopter audience. And one of the best examples to illustrate this point was Nostr, and the kind of spark that was ignited in December when Jack Dorsey started talking more about Nostr, and activity on the platform on the protocol just exploded. And it went from, pretty close to, I don't know the exact user numbers back in December, but it wouldn't have been more. I don't think it was more than.
You could
10,
round that to zero. You could probably round it to zero.
And now it's today. I think I saw yesterday there were over 800,000 profiles with bios on Nostr. Doesn't necessarily confirm those are humans. There could still be some numbers that are not quite correct, but I think the consensus now is that it's in the six figures. And there's hundreds of thousands of actual humans that are sending and receiving messages. And of course, payments are tied to those messages. So those are zaps on Nostr. It's basically the same idea of what you have on Stacker News, where you can send sats. You can now do it throughout the Nostr ecosystem.
And for whatever reason, that's the media that I am drawn to, and I've started zapping people and sending stuff out that's my entry point. Like I've been on Stacker News a little bit and Fountain, but for whatever reason, Nostr to me is like, oh, I'm reading these guys share stuff I'm interested in anyway. I'll just use this platform. And now if I like something, I've been sending some zaps, and it took me a little while to get it set up. I have my profile. I figured out how to get my picture on there. It feels like the internet, like to me, you're too young young to remember this, but in the 90s to get on the internet, like you would buy a modem from Best Buy or something, or Radio Shack, and you'd come home and you'd like jam this thing in your computer, and then you would connect to the internet, and you would cheer. You're like, oh my God, like I connected, like it didn't fail, because sometimes it would fail. You wouldn't even be able to get on, or someone else was on your home talking on the phone at home. And you would be like, Mom, like, can you get off the phone? I need to get on the internet. It's like back in those days. And it would work. You would cheer. And you remind me of that when you say the Lightning Network. Like we're so far past that, but we're also so early.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's with Nostr. So can you just describe Nostr a little bit more for anyone who hasn't heard what Nostr is all about yet? Just what it is and what's going on there?
Yeah. So I think of it as it's a censorship resistant protocol for passing messages, or as they're called on Nostr, notes. And so you can do it's very flexible. You can do all sorts of things. And I think we're at the very earliest stages of discovering what can be passed along as a message or a note on Nostr. I mean, some apps are exploring direct messages, encrypted direct messages as, DM chat functionality. We see a number of apps already that do essentially Twitter on Nostr, which is, decentralized Twitter. We have Jack Dorsey has put up a bounty of, I believe, 10 Bitcoin for someone to build a GitHub on Nostr. And so there's all sorts of new experiments people are running about, what can we put on Nostr? What can we build that takes in and spits out messages to, in a way that cannot be censored? That's the idea that people are kind of hoping to achieve here. And there's a ton of builders that have just flocked to the ecosystem in the last month or two. There's a ton of users. And one cool thing is that because if a builder decides they want to build a new app on Nostr, well, there's already 800,000 of those users with bios on Nostr. And so all they need to do is get the user to come over and check out their app. They don't need to make a new account or anything. There's no friction there, right? Like
describe that. Why don't they have to make a new account? So if you're using the Nostr protocol and you use a client to get onto it. So think of that for anyone listening to this language. Think of it like you're using a certain browser or a certain piece of software to engage with Nostr and share messages like you would on Twitter or something. Why can someone go to a different application or a different client or a different front end interface? And why do they not have to recreate their profile and recreate all these things? How's that working?
So your identity is a key pair on Nostr. It's a public and private key, similar to how your Bitcoin address is a public and private key. And so that follows you along through the Nostr ecosystem. Whatever app you use, you can bring that key pair with you. You can also generate a new one if you decide you want a different identity, or you don't want, you want to lose your current identity.
Tired of the old one. Yeah.
Yeah. And it's just as easy, it's just as quick as spinning up a new Bitcoin address or a new wallet. And so you now have this functionality where you can now move between apps as you wish, and you don't have any friction of creating a new friend list, right? Like this is
because it all pops up, like, it's all there. It's always on the network. So when you use a new client and put in your private key to get back on, that you have to keep secure. But when you use that as your login, so instead of your email, you're using this private key. And when you do, everything that was on there is still on there. So your picture pops up, your profile, your description, any URLs, and all the messages and all the friends that you follow and the things that you've liked, it's all there.
Exactly. And this is one of those things that has that Web 2 products. So think like Facebook and Twitter and YouTube, Google, like they have all used the fact that they have your user information on their platform to extract value from you. Like this is what they rely on, and their ability to extract value comes from the fact that you can't just leave Facebook's ecosystem without losing all your photos, all your friends, all your connections, everything. And unless everyone all at once decides to leave Facebook or leave Twitter and leave Google, which to date they haven't, unless everyone decides at once to do that, the next platform, there's no bootstrap mechanism. You either need everyone to come in all at once and decide to join a new platform, or you kind of sidestep the whole thing with Nostr and build a protocol with identity at that base layer where now anyone who wants to build an app on top of the protocol, on top of the Nostr protocol, can now plug into the identities of the whole protocol. So everyone who exists on Nostr can now instantly be a user of any Nostr app.
Huh. So you bring better value to the ecosystem, and the people are already there. You don't have to like try to create an audience. The users and audience is there. You just have to bring better value. It's really kind of cool. And then it's almost like we're separating identification back away from the central controllers of Web 2.0, because my Gmail address or my Hotmail or Yahoo or like, I don't know, whatever people are, Outlook, that email address is always kind of controlled. But now I'm taking identity back to myself. I have to protect that private key, but I can log in from anywhere and nobody can really stop me.
Exactly. And, I wonder now, like, one thing I think about is what does this change about the companies that are building these apps?
Yeah.
How does their relationship with users change? Because now you can't force people to stay on your app. They can all leave in a day.
You can't be an asshole. You can't be an asshole. That's what it does.
Yeah. And then you also can't, if I built an app and said, hey, everyone come over here, it's $1 a month. And then you built an app and say, hey, everyone come on over here, it's free. Well, they can just move over. And so I don't think a completely free version of anything is going to be sustainable on Nostr, because there are costs that you're going to incur operating on Nostr. But I think there's a lot of competition that can now happen between apps, and they're all competing to make the most beautiful, user-friendly interfaces that all connect to the protocol, which has all the users on it.
I wonder if this helps us transition from a world that really went to a clickbait type of sales process. Like all media outlets ended up having to become clickbait type media places, put up this kind of really clickbaity type headline because everyone's just trying to get clicks. And I wonder if this protocol forces people to adapt to really bring more value instead of just trying to get the click. Right. Yeah. Like, I wonder if it's like that big of a shift, because the big media companies that when I was younger, we always depended on to be a trustworthy source of news, that all just got torn and thrown up in the air when everything kind of went to free with Google online and Google controlling that information. The media companies did not know how to compete. So then they just became advertisers on Google. And then when they were advertisers with their content on Google, they just needed clicks because their own other advertisers just looked at clicks for paying them. And it was this kind of like vicious, weird, ugly circle, and it's kind of deteriorated a lot of the good information. I wonder if this change forces people to really bring true value back to the economy instead of getting a very superficial click as the thing of value. Like, you actually have to produce good content, or you have to produce a client of value, something of value. I wonder if that happens, and maybe not. Maybe human nature just always kind of destroys things. Who knows?
Yeah,
but there's that potential.
Yeah, it's still a bit of an open question. I think, though, that, you're right. The previous model has always been centered around ads and clicks and views, like pay per click, pay per view. These are terms we all know, and it's because that has been the metric by which you get paid. Now the metric is it's a metric that's very subjective, and it's different for every person, right? Again, because like I can consume someone's content, and I can find it so valuable myself that I can send them $1,000. And maybe everyone else in the world that saw that content only gave them a combined $10. Well, now I have changed the value of the amount of money they have earned has been influenced so heavily by just me that, you can see how individuals now have the ability to change the ways in which content earns money online. And whereas, like, no matter how much I enjoy a YouTube video, YouTube is going to pay that creator the same, penny or 2 pennies that they were going to pay them for me viewing the ads through the episode. Right. So now it's a bit of a different mechanism. But I will say that the one thing that's untested and unproven at scale is how well this value for value system will operate across the entire internet. Because you can make a case for people choosing to not give back And I think that it is the norm for most people to not give back. I think roughly, 95 to 99% of people probably aren't going to give anything for the creators that they consume, the content they watch.
Sure.
I think if you can count on that 1 to 5% of people continuing to give, then there's a real case for value being this like internet standard way for monetizing content, but it's still to be seen. I don't know if that 1 to 5% relationship holds up when the whole world is using these kind of apps.
You know, that's interesting that you break it out like that. I think it will, because I think some people might consume some content, and let's say they're not interested in sneakers, but they'll watch a few sneaker videos because their friend told them about, some Nikes that were coming out. So they're consuming somebody who's sharing some good information on sneakers, but only 1 to 5% will actually pay in Satoshis or, give some value for value back for those videos. But the other 95% are more casual, but those 95% might be very interested in another subject. So if they go somewhere else and watch somewhere on, Premier League soccer, and someone's giving good breakdowns or good training, how to increase your, I'm just making stuff up, like how to dribble better or something, and they're providing good value there. The people who didn't give any Satoshis or value on the previous videos about sneakers might be people who will in this other topic.
Right.
So you know what I mean? I don't think it's like an absolute where it's 1 to 5% across the board. I just think it's maybe what interests you, and it's 100% of people will do some sort of paying for value, but just at different levels and on different topics.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
It does. Yeah. And I think you can use apps to encourage people to donate as well. And to, like, for example, if I said, my Twitter clone built on Nostr is $10 a month, but the caveat is that the $10, only one of it goes to me. The other 9 is going to be automatically dispersed to the people who you're engaging with on Twitter or on my version of Twitter, right? Then that's one example where you could get someone who wouldn't otherwise contribute or who doesn't want to go through the time of making payments for every single tweet that they see, can have it automatically blasted out by a Nostr client or something like that. I think there's like a lot of mechanisms we can use to tweak the way that people engage with content, whether or not they decide to contribute. And I think at some level, like if people recognize that you as a creator are earning, like your livelihood depends on this model of working, then they may change their behaviors. Who knows? We may actually see more than 1 to 5% of people contribute over time. Like, wow. I don't know how that plays out at scale. But it could change because right now, I don't think there's many people who are strictly earning their income on value for value. There are a couple of podcasts that I've seen do that, but it's from people who are also earning income in other ways.
Sure.
And so it's like, if someone was truly only earning money in this method, maybe they'd see a different output. Maybe they'd see more people contribute just because they know that this person is, dedicating their life's work to this model. Hard to say.
What I want to honor your time here, Kevin, but I want to slip in a couple more questions here. What's really catching your attention other than what we've already talked about? I saw you. I didn't have enough time to look into this. What are is it Geyser projects? What is that? Yeah.
So Geyser is a funding platform. It's a fundraising. Think of like what's the popular funding platform, like WeFunder or something?
GoFundMe or something?
GoFundMe, yeah. So it'd be like a GoFundMe on Lightning, where, again, we're breaking down barriers here and allowing anyone to earn or to, fund their project in sats from anyone else in the world. And so if I now say I want to donate, I can donate to a A-list charity, and I have no idea where that money goes. Or I can donate to someone on Geyser who is building out a project. They tell me exactly what they're trying to build, how much money they need, what they're going to use it for. And I just go ahead and contribute sats. And I believe I can even, I haven't played around with Geyser enough, but I believe you can even programmatically send, like, for example, Geyser has Lightning addresses. So I could pop in my Geyser Lightning address into a show, a podcast, I believe, and have funds come in from the podcast every minute to my Geyser wallet. I believe that's possible now. but I have to confirm that. But there's all sorts of these things that can now be done with donations and fundraising that could never be done before. And they're seeing, over 1 Bitcoin a month now being donated to a few hundred projects on their platform. So it's promising traction. It's, now $25,000, $30,000 a month of Bitcoin that is being donated to these projects.
This is where the lines blur for me, because then in the future, if somebody is, again, I'll use Australia, like I was talking about earlier, if someone's doing something in Australia and I want to donate to this in Geyser, maybe they're going to start something that turns into a corporation that I'm going to have ownership rights in. And now you need a digitally native way to represent those ownership rights too. Like, this feels like it's all coming. And this is what I mean by the friction is going to dissolve here, because the nation state becomes less important. The Canadian corp becomes less important. Like, if you extrapolate this out 5, 10, 15, 20 years, you can see where this is headed. Mm-hmm. Someone's going to have some ability somehow, some way to have legal ownership that's digitally represented, digitally native.
Yes.
Not like, someone started a corporation in Ontario, Canada, and you were a resident here in Canada to participate in that corporation, or to be a director in that corporation, or a shareholder in that corporation. You can really see where this goes. It's kind of weird, Kevin, now that I'm talking to you. This
Absolutely. is weird. It's still anyone's guess how that all evolves, because there's so many pieces of the puzzle that's still, Bitcoiners have a saying, Bitcoin fixes everything, or Bitcoin fixes this. Well, there's a lot of things that Bitcoin on its own does not fix. And so we're going to start to break. The more we use Bitcoin, I think the more we'll realize that, oh, wait, how do I issue shares for a company? Do I do it the traditional way? That's kind of the slow way. I'm sure there's an easier way to do it. And maybe there's some, side chain or some kind of mechanism tied to Bitcoin that distributes these shares. I have no idea, but I think we're going to learn as people start earning Bitcoin, as people start slinging sats around the internet for their favorite content, they'll learn that there's a lot of things that still have not been built. And I think some of these things will be more important as the base of people earning and spending sats also grows. Like, it's not the end of the world that we don't have, the QuickBooks tax reporting for Lightning stuff, because there's only, a small subset of people using Lightning today. But 5, 10 years from now, when people are earning thousands of dollars a month for creating content on the internet, the tax authorities in all sorts of countries are going to come asking, hey, how do you account for these payments? And we will probably have a solution at that point. So there's a lot to be built still, but it's really promising. We're getting a lot of promising traction. This year has been for sure the most impressive year for Lightning builders and Lightning growth. And seeing now, what was 6 or 12 months ago, just a handful of people, it seemed, earning sats, is now blown up to thousands of them on Nostr, now experiencing, what it's like to send sats to and from, each other.
If anyone listening to this wanted to start with doing something with Lightning, what would you first recommend? Would it be getting a Lightning wallet or getting one of the value apps? What would you recommend to someone listening who's like, hey, I just want to play around with this a little bit?
Yeah. So I actually set up a website called stacksats.how, and it's basically a directory of places you can go to stack sats. And if you're looking to kind of the idea here is that I hope that it's a tool for people to earn their first sat on the internet. I think that's a really powerful feeling that you earned it. So it's not free. It's not airdrop. It's not I'm going to get rich off it. It's you put in some level of work. Maybe you played a video game. Maybe you posted something on Stacker News. There's all sorts of fun ways to contribute. At some level, though, you're earning, and you get your first sat, and then now you can do stuff with it. Now you can go play Lightning Poker. Now you can go play some other video game. You can use the sats on Stacker News. You can send them to a podcaster. You can create your own podcast, start to earn sats that way. And you can see the flow of funds happening on Lightning. And then once you grasp that, I think then you're off to the races.
Kevin, I just, I want to thank you for what you're doing. I don't fully know where this drive comes from to share this stuff. What did first attract you to this whole thing, other than you saw something happening that seemed interesting? Where else? Was it just always an interest in technology, or like where is this coming from with you? What's your motivation here? What are you up to, Kevin? I'm trying to figure you out.
Yeah,
I think
it always is interesting to me when something's happening and no one's watching it happen, or no one's paying enough attention. Like I remember before Lightning, well, there was Bitcoin in 2017, I guess. Before that, there was 2013, 2014 Tesla. I was watching that and I'm like, no one's paying enough attention to that. And now I don't spend as much time talking about that stuff, because I think now the world's caught up and the world realizes, okay, it's obviously, it was one of the most valuable companies in the world now. It has come true. The ideas that were seeded, back a decade, 2 decades ago, have now evolved into an incredible company. And I think there's some truth to that in Lightning today. It's not a company, but it is an idea that is still massively underappreciated. And I just think that like being part of that will be valuable for me and for others. And I think being able to spread that and, accelerate that adoption, that's just fun stuff for me.
Yeah, appreciate it, man. I really appreciate what you do. I feel like I think I mentioned before we started recording, you're like a cheat code for me, because when you post something about Lightning, I know I just have to follow you and you're going to put out the latest data. Like, I feel like I'll be up to speed. You'll post something about Wallet of Satoshi. I'm like, oh, cool. Look what's happening with Wallet of Satoshi. Or you'll post something about like Nostr usage. I'm like, oh, cool. Look what's happening with Nostr. So with that, could you share your Twitter handle at least? And I know there's a bunch of other places to find you, but what's your Twitter handle? And then I don't know how to share a Nostr public key very easily. So I don't know. How will people find you online?
So Twitter, I'm at KE_Rooke. That's KEROOKE. On Nostr, I believe you can search for my NIP5 verification. It's kr@stacker.news. And so Stacker News offers a service to give yourself a little verified badge. And I have a podcast, The Kevin Rooke Show, and you can find that on all podcast platforms. And then stacksats.how is the website that I mentioned, where you can explore ways to earn your first sats on the internet.
Cool. And when this podcast goes live, I'll have to remind myself how to do it, because I haven't done it in a while, which I feel embarrassed to admit. But on the Fountain app, I'm going to set it up that if anyone's listening to this and sends sats to Kevin as a thank you, they'll go to Kevin. So I'm going to set it up so that they go to you.
Very
so it's going to be, so if anyone's listening to this and wants to play around with the Fountain app, I know there's others that they can use, but Fountain is one of them. If you go on there and you figure out, it might take you a few steps to figure out how to get some sats over to him. But if you kind of stumble through that, you'll learn a ton, and it'll be cool because we'll be kind of supporting Kevin in his journey here. So we'll do that. Cool. Now I have to make sure when that one goes public, I have to get in there and do that, because it's our team here that puts the podcast out. So now I have to, and I'm traveling for a bit, so I have to make sure when this one goes live, I set that up right away. But yeah, we'll definitely do that. I need a refresher. It's embarrassing to admit that I haven't been in there for a bit, so I got to get back in there. So you're
happy to help you out.
Yeah, cool. Thank you. And yeah, Kevin, thanks, man. Keep doing what you're doing. Thank you for taking the time to do this. Yeah, appreciate it.
It's been a blast. Yeah.
Awesome. Hey, thanks for tuning in. You can find every new episode of the Your Life, Your Term show on all the major streaming platforms. So Spotify, iTunes, Google Play. And if you'd like to get free copies of some of the books that we've put together, like these right here, or some of the reports that we've put together, like these right here, you can find all of those at www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's www.rockstarinnercircle.com. That's it for now. Until next time, your life, your terms.